You see how everything he operates, their mind is broken. It's based on 4-year cycles. How me and Kshama thinks, we think on a never-ending cycle of leftist development, revolutionary development. So then the election happens, then we keep fighting. What happens when the election over during the Bernie campaign? Wow, we got nothing to do. We done. Oh my God, Trump won. What are we gonna do? You guys see how they have no plan to action afterwards? Can you guys imagine, going back to the argument that we made earlier, can you imagine if Rome, my brother Rome, had $450 million to work with? What did the Bernie Sanders campaign do? They wasted all that money paying assholes like Matt Duss.
We need a way to develop working class politics without condemning ourselves to third party marginality. So this is a trick sentence, because that is telling working class people who read this that the only outcome possible.
Hey, Shim, I'll be right back. I gotta refresh. Sorry, I'll be right back. Just keep talking. I'll be right back.
This is saying that this article is saying that the only way for working class people to have any type of independent politics, independent working class politics, is if we are marginalized. In other words, it's just a moral stance. It's not going to be relevant. It's not going to make any difference, and it's certainly not going to win. Now, my response to this is that you can't guarantee, there's no guarantee that we will win any given campaign, but it is absolutely fucking guaranteed that if we keep going down the road of the Democratic and Republican parties, the working class will lose. That much is guaranteed. And so for him to say that we are condemning ourselves to marginality, being marginalized if we don't support the Democratic Party, that is a complete, it's obfuscation of facts, because the working class is marginalized in our
exactly.
Democratic Party. You think the Democratic Party in any way makes the agenda of the working class central? Absolutely not. The working class has been sold out repeatedly and thoroughly by the Democratic Party. We are marginalized inside the Democratic Party. And guess what? Ordinary people, working people understand that. That is why the Democratic Party is in such deep shit. They are in deep shit because ordinary people get it. They are angry and they want an alternative. And at such a moment, for Jacobin to share this article is just stunning.
Yes.
It's astounding. And but one last thing.
Yeah.
But I was saying earlier when you were refreshing that nobody can guarantee that any given independent campaign is going to win. But here's the thing. We can win. We have shown that. In Seattle, we won 4 elections as an independent socialist. The Democrats never succeeded in defeating us. They hate our guts. They hate me, but they never succeeded in defeating us. And I take their hatred. I take the hatred of all these gatekeepers and all the Democratic Party politicians as a badge of honor. I take it as a badge of honor because I know they hate us because we won. Despite their opposition, we won the nation's highest minimum wage. We won the Amazon tax, which raises hundreds of millions of dollars every year for affordable housing. We won unprecedented renters' rights that even today people come up to me in grocery stores and tell me that $10 late fee cap for, late rent fee cap you won, that saved my family's life. That 6-month notice for rent increases that you won, that saved me from becoming homeless. Those unprecedented renters' bill of rights, we won all those despite the Democrats hating us. We won every single election despite them joining big business against us. So my point is that it is absolutely possible to win independent campaigns. But not only that, most importantly, that is the only way we can win anything.
Exactly. And you was absolutely cooking there. You got me fired up. We embrace their hatred. These are the people that I want to defeat. I don't want to join them. I want to see them defeated. I want to see the working class raise their hand against these people, not infiltrate and become the bourgeoisie. But right, Sean, feel free if you want to chime in.
No, I was just going to say it is the moral and political imperative for the American working class today to destroy the Democratic and Republican parties. That is our task.
That's not Zohran Mamdani's task. He said he wants to rehabilitate the Democratic Party. You want to save. the Democratic Party and remind them that they are a party of the working class people. Fuck you. That is not my goal. My goal is I want the destruction of Nancy Pelosi. I want Chuck Schumer to go home crying. I want Hakeem Jeffries, I want his politics to be completely obliterated. And that is what these people don't understand. Kshama, feel free to interrupt anytime. This article is long, it's winded, and it's full of bullshit. And I'll pick out two parts right here quickly because I read the whole thing. And the thing, I didn't check the date. You guys know, it's actually worse that they tweeted this out. Like, I actually thought that they just republished this article because I did see this article before, but I thought they just probably republished. I didn't check the date. But the fact that they tweet this out, in a comment earlier, hit the nail on the head, and I was going to bring this up. Why do they tweet this out? Like, that wasn't a part of my analysis at first, but I'm thinking, like, because they know third parties are rising. Remember what I said in the intro, and I have receipts I'm going to show you. They wouldn't tweet these articles out if they didn't feel a threat coming from a left insurgent third party. Why do you guys think they send the message to AOC to go after Jill Stein? Why do you guys think Hassan Piker, the largest left streamer in the world, attacks Jill Stein and says he doesn't trust her, but he trusts pro-war Matt Duss. He trusts Zionists and allows them to spread genocidal lies on his platform, but he doesn't trust Jill Stein. You guys think this is legitimate? There's no way, in my mind, I think this shit is organic. It's organic in the sense that it's class war, I guess. Like, I guess if I correct myself, it is organic class war. But let me chime in here because I got so many arguments to get this. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. Let's start here. I have just a few paragraphs I picked out. And Kshama, feel free to interrupt me if you have any thoughts, because it's going to be infuriating to hear this. After two failures, here you go. After two failures in two consecutive cycles to capture the Democratic Party nomination, we've seen the return of familiar cause to create a new political party. So they're like, yeah, I know we fucking lost. I know we are a failure of a movement, and you guys are asking us to do something different? Come on, man. Don't ask us to do something different. I know we lost twice. I know we wasted hundreds of millions of dollars. It's been estimated that the working class spent $450 million. For what? Meanwhile, the progressive establishment, like, yeah, I know we lost before, but come on, man. Why we got the familiar call for us to change our strategy? So you guys see how just 2 lines in, and we already see the unseriousness of this argument he makes. And when you read this article, it's very infuriating because there are a ton of fucking like half-baked arguments like this, but it presented in a smug way. Like almost like you can tell this person has never talked to someone like me or Kshama Sawant. You can tell this is someone who's been in his echo chamber and never actually heard the argument for why we should form a socialist third party. It's a ton of liberal straw manning. But let me continue. So he complains that we want to see change. Yet, for over 100 years, we've been employing workers to break with the elephant and break with the ass as an effort to build a party of the working class. And despite our noble efforts, we seem to be no closer to that goal than we did a century ago, which is true. What are the barriers standing in our way? And look at this. Why do third parties' efforts always seem to lead to dead ends? False. You guys see how social democrats have no grasp of history or current events? There is a party just south to our border. How can social democrats make this argument when the Marina Party exists? You have Claudia Sheinbaum that lifted millions of Mexicans out of poverty. I think the number 13 million Mexicans they lifted out of poverty, not because they joined the neoliberal party. It's because AMLO created this party in 2014 and they destroyed the political establishment by appealing to Mexican workers' material conditions. Now Claudia Sheinbaum has an approval rating around 80%. Like she's literally one of the most popular leaders in the world. And she did it by forming a third party. You guys see how we can bring up historical examples. We can bring up example after example after example, revolution after revolution after revolution, where social change happened when people formed their own revolutionary party. But despite that, the academic PMC left, they have cognitive dissonance and they rejected And they advocate for a strategy that has never worked. I said it downtown, so I'll move on. But why is he acting so smuggling as if he delivered win for the working class when they admit that they have no wins? But let me continue this paragraph and I pass it to you for your thoughts. I just have one more segment on this article after this, but let me read it to the end and then I'll get your thoughts. It's worth looking seriously at the development of the American party structure on its own terms to help us understand what type of political organization are the most conducive to success today. You guys see how that's 3 lines of them saying nothing. You guys see how I hate the academic class? Bro, read that last sentence. That last sentence is 4 lines long, and he doesn't say anything. It's academic fucking masturbation. It's nonsense, and this is what the majority of the article is. It's academic masturbation that's not actually making an argument when they have no historical wins that they can point to. There's no scientific process that shows that this is the correct way to achieve victory, especially the fact that you guys had to tweet. The fact that you had to tweet this out, it signs that this is a failed strategy. But I have even more devastating argument to make because when you dive into the article, it gets even goofier because this guy accidentally admits that our strategy is the correct one, and he is too dumb to realize it. And I'm gonna explain here soon. But before I do that, Kshama, you have anything you want to add to this part?
Yeah, two points. One is I wanted to add another historical example to the examples you're talking about, where actually third party efforts are precisely, and I don't want to say third party. It's not about any third party. It's about working class political organizations being formed as part of building militant movements, actually succeeding in putting the fear in the eyes of the billionaire class, of the capitalist class and their parties, and hence working class people winning victories because those were concessions that were wrenched from the hands, they were wrested from the hands of the capitalists and their political parties. There are any number of examples of them. So one key example is from Canada. How Canada won its public health care is a very instructive story because Canada's healthcare was won precisely through the formation of a working class party as a part of a entire process of labor struggle, militant labor struggle, and most importantly a labor struggle. This was in the middle of the 20th century. It was very much positively, very much influenced by the Russian Revolution in the first place. I mean, the Russian Revolution in 1917, which was the only and the most important successful workers' revolution, that paved the way for many gains across the world. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of discussion to be had about why some of the revolutions didn't succeed. But the truth is that militant labor struggles were propelled throughout the world as an inspiration from the Russian Revolution. My own home country, India, got its independence struggle, the victory of the independence struggle from the British Empire was greatly influenced by the workers' revolution in Russia. And in Canada, there were militant labor struggles. And through those struggles, a working class party called the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, CCF, was formed. And that party won the elections in the Saskatchewan province, and they won public health care in that province. Despite all the attacks against them, despite all the opposition from the bourgeois, they were able to win. That public health care became so popular nationally that working class people in Canada nationally were clamoring for healthcare. I mean, this is obviously a shorthand version of the story, but it's a very important story for American workers to hear because the CCF never actually gained power in the national government, in the federal government, but it was the threat of them gaining power in the federal government that forced the Tories to actually institute public health care nationally. And that is how an absolutely earth-shattering victory for the working class was won through the formation of a working class party as a working class party rooted in struggle. It's very important for us to say that it's not just about a third party. It's about a working class party that is genuinely fighting for the working class and is rooted in collective struggle. It is rooted in a democratically organized series of mass movements, mass strike action, really emboldening millions of workers to take action. That is the only way that it can win. And we have shown a very small example, but nonetheless an important example. Our example is important because it is the only contemporary example. That is why it's important. And the only way we won the victories that I mentioned earlier, with like the nation's highest minimum wage and the Amazon tax and the renters' rights, is precisely because we used my office as a vehicle to build social movements. Again, if I had taken office and then with all my good intentions I had decided I actually need to make peace with the Democratic Party, I need to prioritize my career, then that would have led me to completely sell out the movement. We as Marxists took the exact opposite approach, which is we understood that we are going there not to administer the capitalist state, except a little bit being a little bit left leaning. We went there as disruptors of the capitalist state. We went there as fighters for the working class, and by virtue of that, we understood that the Democratic Party represent our class enemies, and hence they are our class enemies also. The political representatives of the class enemies of the working class are also the enemies of the working class. And so it makes no sense for us to say, I mean, it's completely misleading for anybody to say that, well, you need to make peace with the Democratic Party if you want to win anything. No, that is a guaranteed strategy for the working class to get marginalized. The working class has been marginalized for these past decades.
And you was absolutely spitting there, Kshama. And it's crazy to me that we have to prove our argument to these people when the argument is in the result. Why they pretend that the establishment progressive left has been following our strategy? Your strategy is the strategy that has been implemented by the left, and we have gotten zero win for the working class. We have cop cities that are being built all over the country. We are seeing a record amount of homelessness, and we are seeing a rise of a police state with their strategy. And there's a lot of bullshit in this article. I could do a 2-hour stream debunking this PMC bullshit. You know what I mean? I'm a college dropout, and I can revoke the master's and doctorate degrees of any social democrat historian who believe this nonsense. This article is mind-blowingly dumb. Like, I was reading this in prep for the stream, Kshama, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, dude, how are we going to dismantle this article in only an hour? And while giving I'm gonna put this part, because this part right here, he destroys his own argument, and the writer is so dumb they don't realize it, and I'm gonna explain why. So first, what I'm skipping, because there's a lot of long-winded, pointless arguments, he explained how the Bernie Sanders movement, being one of the most successful, like, anti-establishment movements, is why people advocate why he should support, why he should have ran third party. But then he said the people who believe that are wrong. Look, he said there's a few problems with this argument. So I'm just summing up where he's upset that people saying that Bernie should have ran as third party. So look at his arguments that completely destroy itself. There are a few problems with these arguments. Let's start with the math. Bernie's total vote share in the Democratic primary is 7.7 million right now. If we pretend that all those voters will vote for him on the independent line, we could witness Bernie Sanders and his Democratic Socialist Party capturing a whopping 5.9% of the general election vote. He wipes his hand like, you guys see how you guys will only get 5% of the vote if you guys started a third party? And guys, this doesn't even include the amount of people we will pick up. He's taking the numbers he just got in the Democratic primary where most people don't vote. We will get way more votes in this in a general election. So he's taking the Democratic primary vote. But you guys realize if we get 5%, what do every one of these people don't tell you? When people say it's a waste of time to join a third party, they don't tell you if you get 5% of the federal vote, you get federal funding. You are now a legitimate political party. And you want to know what he's not even considering? What is the implication, Kshama, of having 7.7 people on board for a political revolution? So you guys see how the movement building aspect is not even a part of his calculus? He's like, man, we have 7.7 million votes. So what? What do you mean, so what? Nigga, this is the jumping point of a revolution. The critique we have of Bernie is that he took these 7.7 million and then funneled them into the Democratic Party. What if Bernie Sanders endorsed a third party candidate and then pulled for people who supported a third party? So there are people like me who would never listen to fucking Bernie Sanders bullshit when he told you to vote for Joe Biden. But if he ran for a third party, I would have supported it. So think about the amount of support that Bernie Sanders lost by refusing to go third party. Then you peel the people who fall off the Overton window, what I described earlier. So you have Democrats you recruit, you have third party activists that are on your side already. Then you have the 88 million Americans who didn't vote because they didn't have an option like this. Can you imagine how many of the 88 million Americans who did not vote because they hated Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton that would vote for Bernie Sanders' ascendant third party just as a fuck you? So this is why Bernie Sanders is in a uniquely strong position, because a lot of these people, they don't want to do it for Jill Stein because they don't think she's going to win anyway. You know what I mean? So they're like, what's the point of me rolling out of bed and voting for Jill Stein? But if you have fucking Bernie Sanders with his giant fucking rallies, record amount of fundraising, you guys think people want to roll out of the bed and vote for them as a fuck you? That's a crazy argument to make. So you guys realize the number that he's drawing here is actually bullshit, because his number in a general election will be much larger, because you'll be drawing for a larger base instead of people who just vote for a Democratic Party establishment. But you guys see how this moron who write for Jacobin didn't even consider these things? That comes to my mind immediately when I read these half-baked arguments. One more thing I want to say, Sean. I know you see the chime in as well. You want to know what else he doesn't accommodate for in his arguments here? The money that the working class wasted. So he's like, well, we run third party, we won't win and we won't become president anyway. So what's the point? The point is, we would have had $450 million building a third-party movement instead of going to the DNC. So not only do you get your 6%, which I think would be more, you have a massive fundraising apparatus that would then essentially start a third party. You guys see how this is not part of any. If you read nothing his argument has to do with money. Look, he said, what if we don't win back the Democratic Party voters who supported Bernie? What if Democrats will be upset? That's the argument he's making in this next paragraph. There are a lot of Democrats who voted for Bernie. What if they abandoned them? Fuck them. We got the rest of the people who banned him, who want to start a third party, in Americans who don't vote. But he's obsessed over winning the liberal Democrats, the people that we want to defeat. Secondly, I know I'm long-winded because this argument's so dumb. There's a lot of arguments I got to bring up to defeat it. Back to the money thing. The reason why, more than anything else, I regret my time on the Bernie campaign, and the reason why I will never do something like that again, is because I understand the importance of having a mutual aid society. The United States left should have our own governance. We should have our own outside governments. We should be growing our own food. We should have our own militia. We should be doing things that takes a lot of money to accomplish. So every single dollar that we spent that's not accomplishing that goal is a waste of money. So even if Bernie Sanders started this revolutionary third party and lost at the ballot box, it doesn't matter, because we have a ton of money and resources that is being built to start a revolutionary movement. But instead, that money, that $450 million we spent on the Bernie campaign, was flushed down the toilet. It was wasted. You know that single mother who's struggling to get by, who donated $7 to Bernie Sanders? Wasted. Every single motherfucker who donated to Bernie Sanders, you wasted your money. But you want to know who don't consider it a waste, Kshama? People like the person who wrote the Jacobin article, Kyle Kalinske, TYT. You know, these people have made millions of dollars from the Bernie campaign. RBN is a post-Bernie movement. Our channel started after Bernie lost. We didn't benefit from the rise of the Bernie media industrial complex. That's why we are not attached to it. So there are people who professionally had their careers made, fam. People like Matt Duss. He is now a DNC insider. No one gave a fuck about him before. There are people who made millions of dollars from the Bernie campaign. That's why they don't view it as a waste, Kshama, because it wasn't a waste for them. They made a ton of money. Their career was made over this. They became famous because of this. So you guys think they will just give that away? Oh, you guys, I'm sorry for that long rant, but that's just only 2 paragraphs here. One more thing I will say, and Sean, I'll give your thoughts. You want to see how silly the argument is? And I will acknowledge that this is 2020 now, but it's still a silly argument. The argument that it was making is, what about AOC? What about Ilhan Omar? They literally say in this article, well, if AOC won as third party, she wouldn't have won. Bruh, that's your argument. Like the AOC. Oh man, if only we lose. If we lost AOC, we are screwed. That's an unbelievably weak and desperate argument. What about AOC? What about Ilhan Omar? You mean the people who voted for war, who funded bandit Nazis in Ukraine, who voted to break the rail strike? We are supposed to stop building a third party so people like them can win. All right, I'm done. I can rant on. This article is unbelievably bad. That's why it's crazy that they retweet this. You know, they think that this is such a strong argument that they tweet it out every probably a year or so. So Kshama, I pass to you. We move on for this article finally. But I really wanted to take our time and dismantle this. I really hope I did a good job there because there's so many. Like this article is so dumb, bro. It scrambles my brain. I'm like, where do I even start? Yeah, it is. What's up, Ryder? My friend. It is this article triggered the fuck out of me, bro. Like skimming this article. If you want to get fucking triggered, you will see in a nutshell why I hate the PNC left. If you read this article and you still don't despise the PNC left, you got a heart of gold. So Kshama, sorry. Any final thoughts on this article, and then I'll move on to a few more receipts.
Oh yeah, and yeah, please don't say sorry. I agree with all the things you're saying, and just to add to what you were saying, I mean that when they say it's not good for us, they say what they really mean is not good for their careers.
Yeah.
So us does not mean the working class, and that is why one of the hallmarks of a successful movement, when I say successful for the working class, for the masses, is a leadership that is actually fighting in the interest of the working class and not actually making a career for themselves. And so careerism is not an incidentally unfortunate aspect of movement leadership. Careerism is the death knell of movements.
Absolutely.
So we have to fight tooth and nail against careerism. And I'm putting a fine point on it also because the experience of being sold out repeatedly by the Democrats, by the progressive establishment, by the labor leaders, by the NGO leaders, understandably makes many young people, young activists especially, hostile to the idea of leadership in general. And they talk about, well, we want leaderless movements, we want spontaneous movements, we don't want any organizing. I think that's a mistaken conclusion to draw from a justifiable frustration, because there is no such thing as a leaderless movement. There's any movement has some idea or another deciding the direction of the movement. And then when I say leadership, I mean, what are the ideas that dominate the movement? It's not that there's any vacuum, because that doesn't make a movement. A movement always has some ideas that determine the direction of the movement. And so the only question there, the only variable there, is whether the leadership is accountable to the working class, whether or the leadership is careerist and rotten, whether the leadership is bringing forward ideas and tactics and strategy that will actually succeed in winning victories for the working class and defeating the bosses class and their politicians. Those are the questions, not will there be leaders, and let's not reject leaders. What we need is mass movements with the correct kind of leadership. And throughout working class history, what it shows is that the most successful movements have been the movements that have been led by socialists, by Marxists. In fact, another historical example that we should include in this discussion is actually there are two very important examples. One of them is how the New Deal was won. It wasn't won by FDR's beneficence. It wasn't a Democrat named FDR who decided to be magnanimous and who decided to defy his capitalist donors and do something for the working class. The New Deal, which really was the harbinger of a certain advancement in living standards and massive victories for the working class overall, which paved the way for many other victories like Medicare and Medicaid, and also the civil rights movement and all of that. Though that New Deal was won as a concession from FDR and the capitalists he represented as a result of three very powerful general strikes, the first of them being the 1934 general strike in Minneapolis. These general strikes were led by Marxists, by Trotskyists, and by a whole layer of militant working people who were ready to fight. They made enormous self sacrifice, and they had the correct ideas in the leadership of the movement. The other example from history that we should draw inspiration from is the 1970s. The Vietnam War was ended. Roe v. Wade, abortion rights at that time were won. All the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, was formed. The Occupational Safety and Health Act was passed. These historic victories were won, especially the ending of the Vietnam War, when Richard Nixon was in the White House. He was as warmongering of a reactionary as they come. He was a Republican. And yet these movements won victories because, again, they were a threat to the ruling class. And the working class cannot win without becoming a threat to the ruling class. And that is our job, to build movements that actually threaten the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And that is how, just to quote, our class enemies often give us the best compliments, actually. And what we did in Seattle, by the way, is through one socialist, one Marxist elected office, only one, we were able to do what the Seattle Times, which is a newspaper of the ruling class, what the Seattle Times called commandeer the political agenda of the city. That is what we did. We commandeered the political agenda of the city. And as another newspaper, I believe Mother Jones wrote, we dragged the Democrats by the nose for our agenda. We dragged them by the nose to force them to vote yes on what became the highest minimum wage in the nation. We dragged them kicking and screaming. They weren't supporting it, but we forced them to do one thing after another. And our whole decade on the city council was a series of unprecedented victories. Those are the lessons that we need to draw from history in order to understand, to add to what you were saying, Nick, about how deeply problematic this article is. I also want to say a couple of things. It's how misleading is this? I mean, this guy, the author of this article, is a labor leader.
That's so fucking crazy.
I know, it's completely horrible. He talks about a number. Nick, just think about it. 7 million people, or nearly 8, he says 7.7, so it's nearly 8 million people. You know what you can do when you have 8 million people on your side? Oh my God.
That's why I read the argument. I'm like, don't you realize he's cooking his own argument? The argument that he's presenting is why we said we should start a third party. But go ahead, Kshama. And I'll explain why I think that number will be higher. I think that because that number is the Democratic primary, dude. Like, more people will vote for the fucking general. Like, what are you talking about? Go ahead, Kshama.
Exactly. I mean, I want to come to that point too, and that is a very important point. But I'm saying even before that, I mean, what an utter shambles of a labor leader would say that when you have 8 million working class people on your side, oh, that's nothing. That's a business unionist leader. Do you know what we as Marxists would do if 8 million people were rallied to fight alongside us? That would be, that would be the potential for actually building the beginnings of a revolutionary struggle, which is what we obviously need. And we accomplished earth-shattering victories in Seattle with far fewer people on a far smaller scale, because every single of the thousands of people we mobilized was turned into a fighter, was turned into an activist. We didn't build passive support. We, in fact, insisted on people. Like when working people come up to me in grocery stores and tell me, Kshama, thank you for fighting for this or that, I tell them, that's not good enough. You've got to get involved. And I give them a leaflet and tell them, will you come and show up to this? Because you need to be there, because I didn't win these things because I'm great or anything like that. We won these victories because we collectively fought to win these. And only collectively do we have the ability to become a real threat, a credible threat to the ruling class. And just one other thing, on your point about that number would have been greater in the general election, that is a very crucial point, Nick, because we were insisting, my fellow socialists and I at that time, we were urging, and I urged this to Bernie even before he ran, as Chris Hedges was saying earlier in your clip. I was urging him to run independent in the first place. But even after he ran as a Democrat, and then as we had correctly predicted, they destroyed his campaign. and they made Hillary Clinton they just anointed her as the candidate. At that time, we said Bernie needs to run independent all the way to the general election, and he would have won more votes. What's astounding about this article? I mean, one of the million things that's shameful about this article is, I mean, we are spoiled for choice, but is the fact that this article was written in 2020. That was years after even some of the mainstream Democratic Party analysts were forced to publicly admit that Bernie would have won against Trump in 2016. See, that's
Exactly.
the lie. That's the biggest lie possibly in this article, where they're asking you to believe that somehow getting 7.7 million people to vote for you in the primary is just a lost cause. And that article came after their own political pundits were being forced to admit that actually Bernie would have won had he run against Trump. And let's not forget the state of West Virginia, which went in big numbers for Trump. Bernie won every one of the 55 counties in West Virginia in the Democratic primary.
Imagine how many Trump supporters would have voted for a third-party Bernie movement. There were many who said they would. Anecdotally, I've seen people say this. The data represents the fact that there are a lot of Trump supporters who, they're not revolutionary, but they're just looking out for an option. They hated both side establishment, so they chose Donald Trump. So that's why that number is such a joke, that 7.7, because he don't include the Trump supporters we would have won over. He don't include the 88 million Americans who didn't vote, that would have voted for a rising ascended Bernie movement. But once again, our argument, and it's very important to understand the argument I'm making, it's not about winning. Like, this guy don't even understand it's not about winning this election. You see how everything he operates, their mind is broken. It's based on 4-year cycles. How me and Kshama thinks, we think on a never-ending cycle of leftist development, revolutionary development. So then the election happens, then we keep fighting. What happens when the election over during the Bernie campaign? Poof, wow, we got nothing to do. We done. Oh my God, Trump won. What are we going to do? You guys see how they have no plan of action afterwards? Can you guys imagine, going back to the argument that we made earlier, can you imagine if Rome, my brother Rome, had $450 million to work with? What did the Bernie Sanders campaign do? They wasted all that money paying assholes like Matt Dutz and what's his name? Fahad Secure, his campaign man. I forgot his name. He paid those people 6-figure salaries. Anyone on the Bernie campaign balling. Then they wasted millions of dollars on TV ads that obviously worked, right? Can you imagine if we had 7.7 million people and we decided to start RBN chapters? One of the hardest things about RBN chapters is having funds. That's why when people are like, Nick, can you start RBN chapter in our city? I'm like, bro, we struggling to start RBN chapters in 4 cities. Bro, it takes a lot of money. Can you imagine if we had 7 million people? And I'm undercounting now to prove my point. Imagine if we had 7 million people and then we gave them $450 million, divided among themselves and said, hey, y'all, let's create mutual aid societies. Let's create socialist chapters all over the country with this $450 million. Now, a lot of people in the comments, I highlighted a few of them. We can shut down airports. That's not even including the direct action potential of having that many people on your side. But these are things that they don't even consider, bro.